Before we start the deck profile, a moment of silence for Nemain after the recent ban list. Alright, enough griefing and let's move on. So Shadow Paladin has been notorious to be relying on Nemain heavily and has been called as Simp Paladin or Nemain Paladin. Although it's awfully accurate, but with every booster release for Shadow, there has been quite a few great options released, but however just not of 5k base power. The incredible value from Nemain helps Shadow Paladin, or in this case Luard, to be a farm machine and is a reliable engine. However, with a restriction of Nemain in Luard decks, it does help open up an aggressive option for the deck. In this deck profile, I'll be going through my take on the new Luard, which integrates the Clear engine. The introduction of Clear engine allows the deck to be very aggressive on turn 1 and 2. It also helps to fill the drop zone for Luard Dragheart, allowing for a free core strike into Drag Driver to really get the superior core going. A PSA to all, this list is a draft and it will be further improved in the long run. Moving on to the grade 3s, we first up run 4 Dragheart Luard. So the first skill is that you can actually sack 2 original grade 1s on the field to destroy one of your opponent rear guards and draw an additional card. The second effect is Counter Blast 3, and for each grade 1 in your drop zone, it reduces the Counter Blast cost and return 2 normal units from your deck from the drop zone to the deck, and then you get to superior right into the Drag Driver. So I run it at 4 because obviously this is a Luard deck and this card really helps to generate force markers, more than most force decks currently available in the game. Next, we do run 3 Drag Driver Luard. So he has 2 skills. The first skill being on place, you can actually counter blast 1, superior calling grade 1s, plus 1 Luard Soul for each Luard Soul, from your deck to the field. The second effect is actually what makes it quite broken, I would say. It actually plus 5k for each grade 1 on the field, and when you have 2 grade 3 in your soul, it does add a crit to all your grade 1s. So effectively making all your columns having a force 2 while playing force 1. So I run it at 3 as it's a comfortable number for me. To me, the Drag Driver Luard have to stay in the deck for it to be effective, and given you only have returned 2 units with Dragheart most of the time, it is not the target you want to return, and having an extra copy in the deck does help the deck to flow a lot better. Lastly, I do run the Claret Sword. So what does Claret Sword do? The first skill is just basically on place. You can actually look at the top 3 of a deck and mill the grade 1s possible to the drop zone. And for each grade 1 mill, you do plus 10k. So the second effect is basically on upon attack, you can buy 7 grade 1s on the drop zone after the Vanguard attacks. You can actually restand the Vanguard and then drive -1. So I do run a one-off only to allow me to have an option to just convert this deck into a Claret deck out of the blue. This opens up possibilities of a cheese game as we are running most of the Claret engine stuff. Doing the restand on turn 3 is definitely possible. Additionally, it can also be the deck final push with the many force marker you have accumulated over the turns. Now let's move on to the grade 2s. Let me shift these cards first. So first up, I'll be running 4 Morian Spears. So what does Morian Spears do? Soul Blast 1, you can actually discard a card from your hand and draw 1 card. If you discard a great 1, you plus 10k. And if you discard a normal card, you thus only plus 5k. So this is just 1/3 of the Clear engine, and running at 4 copies because this card achieves a lot on its own. Firstly, it allows you to hit aggressive number which normally would have been fully guarded by the opponent. Hitting a 15k alone discouraged opponent to throw a 15k shield which would have been a full guard previously. So secondly, the ability to filter cards out of your hand to hit those pieces you really need. This is a very underrated ability and you never know when it will come in clutch in fixing those bad hands. Lastly, the card does Soul Blast. So on-demand Soul Blast is quite crucial to a lot deck due to the Drag Drivers. Drag Drivers are usually stuck in the soul, and though it helps to achieve more grade 1 superior cores, it doesn't have much value after you hit the 2 grade 3 in soul condition. Thus with Morian Spear, you can Soul Blast it easily and then having it in the drop zone for Dragheart to recycle it later. So now next up, I'll just be playing just 2 more Vessas. So there's 2 skill on it. On rearguard and the deck, it's regarded as a grade 1 if you do have a Luard Vanguard. The second skill is what makes it a very strong card for Luard. After attacking battle, and if there are basically a full field of grade 1, you can actually counter blast 1 and then call a grade 1 from the drop zone. So this is the bread and butter of Drag Driver push turn as it gains the crit and you will always have it on the stacked force marker columns. only running 2 copies of this card as it is searchable and recyclable by Luard himself. However, running only 2 copies have its disadvantages, but optimally 2 copies is all you ever need. Next, I do run the second part of the Clara engine, which is a staple in my opinion, is actually the Dark Pride Dragon. So this card allows you to turbo your drop zone and having the plus 5k power guaranteed. So what does it do? So upon place, you can mill the top 3 of the deck and it plus 5000 no matter what. And if you do mill a grade 1, you can counter plus 1 to draw 1. So the plus 5k power on the early turn is very aggressive and can deter early cards, as I mentioned for the Morin Spear. So allowing your potential critical triggers to go through, which would have been otherwise fully guarded, is very strong. I would love to run more copies of this card, but due to the deck space constraint, it can only be run 2 copies as of now. Next up, we'll be going through the grade 1, which is actually the majority of the deck. So starting up, it'll be 4 Brandwens. So what this card does is actually just a Grade 3 Searcher, and it plus 5k if you have 3 grade 1 in the drop zone. So this card is a very reliable 13k stick when you're doing your more faster turns, and with the Clara engine in the deck, hitting 13k power will be more reliable than ever. I also forgot to mention that this card is a Grade 3 Searcher as well, so it actually adds a lot of consistency into helping you ride that sweet Luard, which you would need to ride every game. Next up, I'll be running 4 Blue Espada Dragon. So what does it do is actually on place you can mill the top 3 of the deck, and if you do mill a Morin Spear or Clara Sword Dragon, you can actually add it to hand. And if you do have 5 grade 1 in the drop zone, it does plus 10k. So this is the last part of the Clara engine and turbos your drop zone count very effectively, and also when you hit the 5 grade 1 drop zone, 5 grade 1 in the drop zone, it does get a 10k buff, and this card will hit quite hard. So and having the opportunity to even hit the Morin Spear, which you do run 4 off, and the Clara Sword, although it's not the most consistent way of finding those cards, but the cost to play this card is actually absolutely free. So free turbo and power, what not to love. And then next up, the new cards for the set, which is the Abyssal Hour. Effectively, it's a Swordbreaker but with a lesser cost. Not gonna lie, I do miss Swordbreaker. However, this card simply outcasts Swordbreaker in terms of resources, especially the flexibility. So Swordbreaker counterblast cost has always been nasty and would usually be a dead card towards the late game because you don't really have much counterblast to be using. To have to use. So Abyssal Hour does stay relevant throughout the course of the game, although one can argue that the 5k power from the Swordbreaker helps the aggressive nature of the deck, which is what I'm intending to play towards. However, the flexibility of the resources is what seals the deal for me. Next up, we do run the Black Sage Charon. So Charon is very popular in Luard decks due to the synergy with Luard's superior cost as well as Mofessa. So it was not very popular in the old days because there's not much reliable superior core methods. The only most reliable one was actually just Matcha, and Matcha wasn't able to fit in most deck space. So the counter charge it provides and the plus 3k, it helps the deck to play more aggressively with the counter blast and while maintaining resources for the future turns you have. And then moving forward, I'll be calling these cards the tech spots. So due to Luard's ability to recycle and superior core specific grade 1s, you're able to afford one-offs and get away with it. So each grade 1 adds a different value to the deck and can come in clutch for these different scenarios. So the first one, which will be the Knight of Strict Order, Suez. So it's actually just a simple 20k beater, and it only gets 20k if you do have a full field grade 1. So I have seen Lee start to play multiple copies of it given how raw power this card can have, so I can understand why. However, as a current list of mine are more grade 2 orientated in terms of the rear guards, this card will mostly be vanilla and only effective during the Mofessa push turns. Next up, Nemain Painter, which is just on place. You can soul charge 1 card in the drop zone and then plus 3k. So this card helps in situations where games go pretty soul heavy. It also helps to being a 10k beater or booster to push for damage in the early games. Next up, I do run Hardship Sage Decron. So its ability just allow your grade 1s to be interceptors effectively. So allowing you to have 20k free shields on board is honestly very underrated. Usually after a Mofessa push turn, you end up with 5 grade 1s on the field and have to solely rely on your hand to guard for any turn. Having access to the 20k shield, however, and not to mention their individual 10k shields, allow you to have a better flexibility in guarding. So next up, the last card I play, which is the Hunter of Transgression Magdobo. I can't really know, I'm not very sure how to pronounce his name. But on place, you can actually discard a grade 1 and then draw 1 card. and you plus 5k to any of the unit on field. So this card allows you to effectively cycle in the early game while filling the drop zone grade 1 count. Not to mention the plus 5k is given to a unit of your choice, which can help to hit magic numbers in the early stage of the game. Aggressive plays are only rewarding when they hit over damage trigger, so the opponent have to guard against it despite hitting a damage trigger, which could have relief of the pressure. Lastly, let's go through the trigger lineups, and it's quite simple. It's actually just simply 12 criticals and 4 heals. So it's a very aggressive deck, and I would think that when you open crit in this current meta, it does push the game fairly quickly, and then the nature of the deck where it hits very aggressive numbers in the early game will definitely help. Now let's go through some card discussion that we will see play in Luard currently post ban list. But before we really dive into discussion, let's talk about the PBD chain right. So the ban list definitely did not touch the chain right possibility, and players still can opt to play the chain right by playing 4 Blasted Dark and 4 Band-Aid. Definitely without Nemain, the consistency is lower, but this is still seen possible in the premium format in the form of Ezo Go Paladin. A potential chain ride is still a chain ride possibility. I personally am more convinced now not to play the chain ride due to how high rollish it feels and a very hard break if you don't hit it in the games. So let's move on from the chain ride that has caused these bannies to even happen and move on. For the Great Trees, I do see players opting to play Danger Large Dragon. I personally like the card if the meta was very protect heavy, and especially the new Shiranui gaining 2 markers in a turn. The card does scale well with the force markers, but however I do not run it in my decks currently as it opposes to the speed of the deck. Moving on to the Great Tools, with Nemain being restricted in Luard, the infamous Fallen Dive Eagle falls with it too. As you're not able to access to a 5k unit as easily anymore, the card becomes pretty obsolete and will not be able to see the light of day. Darkness Maiden Matcha is a pretty good card alongside with Drag Wizard Liafor. These two helps to cycle and find your Great One to the field, but are only good if you're intending to set up the field. In my opinion, Dark Pride Dragon and Morin Spear, which belongs to the Cleric engine, excels better in aggressiveness as well as flexibility. Lastly, into the Great Ones, we do have quite a number of options. Firstly, Abyss Router. This card allows for a 5 attack turn with the Mofessa with its superior calling from the drop zone, then calling a Great Zero from hand to the other column. This card also helps the Soul Blast, which is good at removing the stuck Drag Driver in the soul. This card is initially placed in my deck but was taken out as I value the soul more for Morin Spear. Next up is Apocalypse Bat, which you can't forget that the partner in crime, which is actually Nightmare Painter. Similarly to Abyss Router, this card enables you a 5 attack in a turn with Mofessa, but in exchange, it's a great on Rare for both columns, which should be buffed by Drag Driver critical triggers. The only drawback to this is how pieces reliant the deck becomes, as you will need to run 3 Apocalypse Bat and 2 Painter for more consistency, which will disrupt the deck list further. So next up, Kubao, Rip Nemain, Rip Cooler's Dog. This card works very well with the 5k power units, and having Nemain gone, this card goes away with it too. So there's no point to actually farm value when you have to actually hardcore everything else. Next up, we do have Drag Wizard Nis. This card is actually pretty good for a pure Luard list, but however I dislike the flexibility of the card. It's only good for the on-right skill, but the real skill is pretty lacking, and I will prioritize the soul for once again Morin Spear. However, as meta further develops and more Regas reliant deck come about, this card will see play for sure. Lastly, let's talk about the Mage of Enwintered Woods Elwagin. So this card is actually very decent in turboing your drop zone, as his skill works very well with Morin Spear. However, this card does benefit more towards a clear carrot deck than a pure Luard deck. So I have actually considered playing this in my deck list, but however, other great ones does play a better role than it currently. Thank you for watching till the end, and do drop a like and subscribe, and do comment if you do enjoy the video. Thank you.